Okay, I'm gonna get started. I think most people have been let in now. I apologize if there's some background noise. I'm sitting in Ben Gurion Airport. I've been here in Israel since very early on Monday morning, and I'm flying out in a few hours. The actual official mission of the Jewish Federation's national network was only yesterday and today, but I came in 2 days early because I wanted to make sure that I had unhurried time to actually sit face to face with some of the survivors and some of the heroes. And fortunately, I was able to meet with a whole range of people who were right in the middle of this nightmarish situation. People asked me if I was afraid because of the war going on, and actually, I was not concerned about my safety because um, I think things are much safer than they were on October 7th. I did hear a few sirens, but I was, I was always safe. What I was most concerned about was having to hear the stories um, of the human suffering, and in particular, to meet with parents whose children were uh, taken hostage, who were kidnapped. So I'll start with that. Through my cousin here in Israel, I was actually able to arrange meeting with one of the mothers, um, Hadas Calderon, whose two children, uh, well, let's see, I'll show you uh, Hadas, um, and I sat with her. Those are her two children and her husband. So her daughter is Shachar, she's 16, and her son is Ofer, and he's 12. And in the background is her husband, who she's actually separated from, and the kids were over at their dad's house, which was just 2 houses down from her house on the kibbutz. And I spent an hour with her because I wanted to help her get her story out. And I happened to have arranged a TV interviewer, our marketing communication director arranged a TV interview with ABC7. So I used it for her. I said, let's just have you interview her instead of me. And they actually aired it today, which she appreciated because you can only imagine she can't stop for a minute thinking, is there anything I can do to make sure that I see my children again? And really, the only thing that she can do is the same thing that we can do, which is to think of every creative way we can to keep this in the forefront of public opinion and to make sure that the media and public officials are constantly thinking about over 240 civilians who Hamas has captive. Then during the actual mission yesterday, on the first day, we met with another family who has children held hostage from the same kibbutz, a kibbutz called Nir Oz, which was one of several pretty close to the Gaza border, but well inside Israel's 1948 borders. And I actually was able to get a videographer in there to make a short video of what we heard from that family, and we'll play it for you now. Here we go. This was literally just made today.
We're here representing the Jewish Federations of North America. It was very important for us to come here so that everyone in Israel can see us and know that we're standing next to you.
My family is my Aunt Ruthie, my Uncle Abraham. They're 78 years old. My uncle is not well, he can barely walk. We know they took him. With my aunt and with Karen, my cousin, and her son Ohad, we do know that they're alive. My uncle and aunt built the kibbutz along with my parents. I was born in the kibbutz as well. This kibbutz have less than 400 people. Something like 70 people were kidnapped to Gaza along with my family, and more than 20 murdered, butchered in the kibbutz. This is their only grandchild, and this is their only daughter now, but they don't know it because they don't know that we buried their son. Without them, my cousin Toi, he was 50 years old, he was murdered in the kibbutz. They shot him.
In some cases, they made sure that we won't be able to identify the bodies. It went down to ashes. Some people will never be properly identified and buried.
This is the symbol. Kibbutz Nir Oz is a quiet, peaceful community. The people who live there are peace-loving people. They are going to the border with Gaza, and they're taking people from Gaza to hospitals. They helped Palestinians in Gaza, and they worked the land. These people are farmers.
Where is he? Is he with his mother? We don't know if he's with his mother. 25 days he's in Gaza inside a tunnel. I don't know where is he. I don't know. And he's 9 years old.
You are on top of minds for the community.
We'll do anything we can to help.
You are front of mind for us, and we are connected.
When we are together and strong and focused, there isn't anything that we can't do.
And so know, as messengers of North America Jewry, we're here with you, we hear you, we understand you, and we will do everything we can to be with you at this time and moment to get your family members returned.
So that gives you a taste of what we experienced, really for me, for the past 4 days. It's just unbelievable cruelty. You know, we understand that there are military conflicts. We understand that, you know, armies challenge each other sometimes, but this has nothing to do with military. In fact, they made sure to avoid any military. They went only for civilians, and they made sure that they didn't just kill civilians. They kidnapped especially the children and the elderly, apparently because they were easier to transport. The rest of them they killed, but they didn't just kill them. They tortured them. And one of the main kibbutzim that hundreds were killed, they believe that 80% were tortured first. Many were raped. The bodies were burned. Many of the families will never be able to identify their loved ones because the DNA can't be isolated. They even found out that they would switch dog tags to confuse the families so that they would get the wrong body. So it's clear that this is not about a military or even political. This is just plain terrorism. And it's about erasing these people, destroying their families, destroying their homes, burning their bodies, burning their homes so that there's nothing left. The Israeli people are still in shock. It's a very small country. I haven't met anyone who didn't know someone personally that was either killed or kidnapped, or who had their home destroyed. The woman who helped me through the airport security had a friend at the music concert, at the Supernova concert, who barely escaped with his life, but his close friend was killed, and someone responding to help was also killed. But there's also wonderful stories of heroism, heroism that you might not expect. 70-year-olds who had been retired from the army for 30 years, who rushed in and saved people, Bedouins who came to the aid of Jews. And that's really the positive story here, that while unfortunately the Israeli army took far too long to get there, many volunteers took their place. Not all of them survived, but all of them were heroic. Sorry for the background noise. And the other really important thing to know is that while the Israeli people are traumatized, they also understand that this is a turning point, that either they will come together and unify and get through their trauma and their grief and come out stronger, or the whole future of Israel is at risk, because this is not something that they can withstand again in the future. It can't happen again. And honestly, for many of them, this was a violation of the promise of Israel. Promise of Israel was that anti-Semitism may happen everywhere else, but if we had a state and a strong army, that people would be safe in their homes from murderers who would come to kill them just because they were Jews in their homes. And many of them who I spoke with felt that this promise was broken, and it will take a while for them to even regain trust in their armed forces, in the Israel Defense Force, and certainly in the government. But one thing that they do have trust in is the Jewish people, their own Israeli people, and the outpouring from American Jews and Jews around the world, which makes an enormous difference to them. Because the only thing worse than suffering this trauma is doing it alone. And they don't feel they're doing it alone because of an enormous outpouring from the Jewish community, but also from Americans in general. Not all Americans, but it made an enormous difference to them that the President of the United States flew in to an active war zone, that there was a bipartisan group of senators that flew into an active war zone, that there are 2 aircraft carriers sitting outside their shores. All of them said that helps them get through this, and they wanted me to thank all Americans for that support. So I think I'll stop there, and let's see how it goes asking questions verbally. If it's too difficult, we may have to put them in the chat, but I'm happy to answer any questions. I can't see people though, so
Did you get updates on the Gaza fighting at all while you were there, Shep?
We're hearing both from the news and also from some military briefings. I was actually had to leave for the airport when they were doing an IDF briefing. One of the, I think, deepest pains that Israelis are feeling is that Hamas intentionally killed their children, killed Israeli children, kidnapped Israeli children, and Israel postponed going in, trying to rescue the hostages, going in, trying to make sure it didn't happen again, leafleted in northern Gaza before they needed to bomb. But they feel that the world is treating them like they're the ones who are callous about civilian life. And it pains them terribly.
Thanks.
Shep, did you have any sense of how the assistance or distribution of the JFNA is doing? How is that going, and what's prioritized, if there is? I mean, I'm sure there's so many priorities, it's hard to say one's more important than another.
No, that's a great question, Larry. Thank you for asking that. I really wanted to make sure that I got to that. So the good news about JFNA's work is that they were there on October 7th because they were there on October 6th. JFNA has been one of the main supporters of the key nonprofits in Israel since the founding of the State of Israel. And they've built up expertise, and they know every town and village. And so they were able to get there much faster than the government. The government, unfortunately, was overwhelmed and shocked and responded very slowly. But the Jewish Agency for Israel was there the very next day. The Joint Distribution Committee was there the very next day. And we can give you any level of information. There was a graphic that we're putting in a special edition of the Jewish News that's being mailed out this weekend that breaks it down into categories, that shows how much has been spent. But let me give you just a very specific example. All 5 of the towns and kibbutzim that were destroyed are unlivable, and there are close to 10,000 essentially refugees who are both traumatized, whose children will never see the toys, the books, the rooms that they lived in. And one of the things that I saw today was that they've set up kindergartens and schools in the temporary housing. In one case, they're using an old hotel near the Dead Sea for the entire population of 2 of the kibbutzim, and they created a school that was the same kids with the same. They couldn't actually use the same teachers in many cases because some of the teachers were killed and others of the teachers were called up into service. But they call the groups the same. They found out what they were working on. Some of the teachers are the same, and they set them up in tents. They set them up in dining rooms, but they made them look like schools. And if it were, I will share those photos when I get back. I'll send them out and I'll show them on Facebook. But it was just amazing what they've done to try to create some sense of normalcy. So that's an example of what the Jewish Federation's emergency campaign has done. But another thing is that they have this Victims of Terror Fund, where anyone whose house has been torched, who's lost family members, they show up the next day and they give them $1,000 in cash. And they say, no questions asked. You have no clothing. You have no house. This is not going to replace all of that, but this is to start the conversation. And we met the person who actually makes sure that every single person gets one of those. We met that team, and we saw how they work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Shep, it's Stacy. If we have a specific organization that's reaching out to us of people we've, either housed in the past for different fundraisers that they've come and stayed in, from Israel, and they are in desperate need as well of funds. I got one today from the people I housed last year through the Federation, and she said they need $2.5 million a month to keep their essential activities running. How do we find out if that organization is getting some of the JFNA money, or how do we direct that?
So great question, Stacy. Unfortunately, every organization has huge needs, and every organization is trying to figure out how they're going to do their essential work. And I received today a detailed list of every single organization that's received funding from the Jewish Federation's funds, which have been incredibly successful. Over 120 million has been already granted out, and that's only about a third of what they have. And so they're doing it on a rolling basis. They're not meeting any organization's total needs because everything is shifting so fast. But we can share out with this group the full list of organizations. And we also can, if your organization, for example, is not on that list, Stacy, I'm happy to send it to the Jewish Federation's National Network, JFNA, and ask them to consider the organization.
That would be great. Thank you.
Hi, Shep. It's Jamie.
Hi.
Marco. Hi. Question for you. So I've been asked a few times about people that want to donate items like clothing and kids' toys, and they just don't know how they can get it there. Do you know of any way that people can do that to get needed items to Israel as well right now?
So, I mean, the challenge with that is that's not what's most needed.
I'm asking, I tell them, but I just don't know if they're,
Yeah. So I'm not really sure what to say about that, because I saw warehouses full of clothing and toys and basic needs that Israelis have donated. The woman who I met with, whose children were kidnapped, she said that within 48 hours she had more clothes than she had before the kidnapping. So that's really just not what they need. What they really need is two things. They need dollars to actually be able to pay for trauma support, to be able to pay for housing, and they need public opinion support. They need all of us to use our social media and our friends and our connections with people in the traditional media and public officials, and to tell their stories. And I know it feels good to want to send those things, but that's really not where the priority is.
Is food security an issue?
Right now, I didn't hear about anyone lacking for food at this moment. One of the organizations that Liat alone connected me with is an amazing organization that they've translated the name as Brothers and Sisters for Israel. It was the organization that was actually coordinating the opposition to dismantling the Supreme Court. And the day of the attacks, they got together that evening, and they decided unanimously to completely change their mission and their focus, and to help Israel recover instead, and to make sure that it was nonpartisan and non-political. But these people, the founder who I met with was one of the most successful angel investors and serial entrepreneurs, and he's there 18 hours a day with people at that level. He was a fighter pilot in the Israeli Air Force, some of the most impressive people in Israeli society, and they have tens of thousands of volunteers, and they're just going out and solving problems. And as I mentioned, unfortunately, this government was somewhat challenged before October 7th and completely got paralyzed after it. And the government is now actually responding much better. But in the first 2.5 weeks, There was a huge gap between what people needed and what the government did. And this organization, among others, but volunteer organizations did miraculous work, including buying weapons for the military. The military was caught flat-footed without nearly enough ceramic bulletproof vests and helmets, and they didn't have the bandwidth to figure out where to get it and how to have it shipped and how to have it tested. So this organization did all of that for them and then turned it over to the military. So what they're doing right now is they're equipping first responders, because that is a real shortage of helmets and night vision and military grade flashlights and things like that. And I was so impressed with how effective and efficient they are that I think something that we could do is to take a portion of what we're raising and use it for those direct life-saving needs where we can see where our dollars are going. They're focusing both on the southern communities that are still vulnerable to missile attacks and potentially more terrorist attacks, and also along the Lebanese border, because the army is tied up and the civilians have to protect themselves and they don't have enough equipment. So that's probably the number one direct need that I learned of while I was here.
Well, ironically, I think I mentioned to you briefly, Shep, my grandson, who was in the IDF, told me that that was a problem when he was in the IDF 2 years ago. So it's not new. They were asleep at the wheel, shall we say, at the wheel, unfortunately.
Yeah, they never imagined this could happen. They believed that the Gaza fence was impenetrable, and they set priorities based on where they saw the highest threats, and so a lot of units were under-resourced because they thought they wouldn't be threatened, and they turned out to be wrong.
Is there any way, hi there, is there any way we could donate ourselves directly to the organization Brothers and Sisters of Israel?
So there are opportunities for people to volunteer here on the ground, if that's what you mean. And there's also opportunities for people to help staying in the United States, in Sarasota, and helping especially with the online war. One of the things that people said unanimously is that second to the military front is the public opinion front. And whether Israel will have the diplomatic support, the military support, and the financial support to protect itself really depends on our ability to tell Israel's story and to remind people that Israel didn't start this, that Israel didn't set out to invade Gaza, that Israel doesn't want to kill Palestinian civilians, but that Hamas is a criminal syndicate that makes money by killing Israeli civilians and then sacrificing Palestinian civilians so that they can run up the body count and look like the victims and get the Europeans and Arab countries to give them, billions of dollars in the name of humanitarian aid, all of which goes to building their hundreds of miles of terror tunnels. And the amount of ignorance about that out there is overwhelming, and we can all make a difference about that. We can all tell 10 people a day who aren't Jewish or who we work with or our neighbors what's really going on, and ask them to tell 10 people, and use our social media and write letters to newspapers. We can make a huge difference there.
Thank you.
Certainly. I can't really see very well whether there are other questions. If not, that's okay.
Hey, Shep.
Hi, Bruce.
Is it the feeling there that one of the big mistakes here was that Israel depended too much on technology and not enough on human resources? And that's one of the reasons this happened?
That was one of the lessons. Yeah, they spent like $1 billion on this super high tech system. And it's clear that Iranian technology was used because the same drones that the Russians have used against Ukraine were used here, and they flew on top of the cameras, and they dropped hand grenades on the cameras, and they did all kinds of things that no one anticipated they would do, but they, the IDF was overconfident in this case. Sadly, uh, it has a lot of echoes of the 1973 Yom Kippur War, where Israel had won the Six-Day War and got overconfident. And I think that happened again. I think that this government was so focused on the settlements in the West Bank, they put all their soldiers there, and they thought, nothing's going to happen along the Gaza border. And so not only, didn't they have the scenario planning to think about this particular scenario, but it took tanks 11 hours to get down there because they had been deployed everywhere else.
Thank you.
Yeah. But again, the amazing thing that's happened is that even though the IDF failed to foresee this and took a while to respond, and the government took even longer, the citizens of Israel have just shown up in every possible way. I mean, the tales of heroism of people who are not even in units, just driving in and taking whatever weapons they had and saving lives of children and elderly is unbelievable. And since then, every single day, literally hundreds of thousands of volunteers are showing up, providing free housing, providing free food, providing free clothing. It's remarkable. And what was a divided country on October 6th is a unified country today. It's we'll never bring back the people that were the 1,400 people or more that were murdered. Who knows what will happen to the 240 plus that are still held hostage? But Israeli society has seen what happens by senseless division, and that's, I think, the seed of hope here.
Yeah. So those people will always be remembered.
Hey, Shep, quick question, Randon Carvel. I was at a happier event earlier this week, the opening of Wolfie's here with the Mitchells and others, and sat with Michael and Marcy Klein and was speaking with some other people as well. And even though, I'm a little bit biased in that I think all the dollars should probably come to Federation, a lot of people said it would be great if we could prioritize maybe the most pressing needs in charities that could use some dollars, and maybe publish either via our website or in the next paper edition, hot link or the websites, whether it be, Magen David Adom or Friends of the IDF, et cetera. And I will let you in leadership figure out, what those priorities need to be, at least for the time being. But I think people want to give regardless. And if another organization may speak to them a little more strongly, they're already Federation supporters for us, but I think they'd also like to do a little bit extra somehow, some way.
So I totally agree, Randon. And we have several that we want to recommend. There were 3 kibbutzim that were completely decimated. One of them is Kfar Aza. Liat made a connection with them a couple days after the war, and we've kept that connection going. And I met with them face to face while I was here. And I think knowing people and being able to actually help them do specific things and see what they're doing is worthwhile. It keeps us connected. It makes us understand what it's like on the ground. So that would be an example. There's a forum for the families of the hostages that we could contribute to directly, and I think we should. And then I would recommend this organization that's doing civil defense, that's training the first responders in the vulnerable communities where they have to protect themselves and they don't have equipment. They're not buying guns with it, they're buying defensive things. And I was so amazed by this organization has brilliant problem solvers that can seemingly overcome any obstacle. So I would trust them completely with my money.
Yeah. What's the
can you hear me?
organization?
Freema J. Go
No.
ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you want me to ask? I have a question.
Go ahead.
Okay. I was told by someone, they said that unequivocally they know that the money that is being raised by this federation is not 100% going to the emergency, that 10% of it is staying here. And I ask you because I want to know.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that rumor came from a congregant at Temple Israel who put it in an email chat or some kind of thing like that. And we followed up with the congregation, and it turned out that that congregant really didn't have any basis for that statement.
Okay. Well, I want to know, then I can refute that with authority and tell them that 100% is going to Israel.
Yeah, not only that, but we didn't even, in the money that we've raised so far, we didn't even collect it in our own bank account. We wired it directly to the national fund, and they wired it directly to Israel. And I spoke with the people who were making the grants, and they won't make a grant to any organization that charges administrative fees. They can only charge direct costs.
I was sure that it was misinformation, but I want to go right to the source, and I will tell them, and for what it's worth, I hope that I can help to squelch this, because we don't want that kind of PR.
No, it's possible that they were looking at our annual campaign where we do have to pay for running the federation, but that's
of course,
an
that's
entirely
different.
different thing. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Thanks for asking the question. It's really important.
Very important. It should be stated in the next newsletter that comes out.
We'll do it. In fact, we did put it in the inside. We have this electronic newsletter that we sent out yesterday, and we did put it in there, but we need to keep reinforcing it.
I can tell you that in Debbie and I and our calls, we have brought it up immediately. We have not even waited for a question. We've told them none of this is being retained by the Federation here in Sarasota-Manatee County. It is going directly to the national, to JFNA, and the JFNA is distributing it all in Israel.
Oh, thank you, Larry. And so we will send out to this group afterwards the breakdown of what's been granted, the list of organizations, and the fact that no overhead or administrative has been taken out at all.
Thank you.
Marcy, did you have another question?
I was just, you kept mentioning this organization, the last one that you also thought highly of, but you didn't mention its name.
So I think I was talking about, well, so its name in Hebrew, which took me a while for my cousin to get me to say it right, is Achim Leneshek. But the way they've translated it now is Brothers and Sisters for Israel. And it's a huge network that's done miraculous things, solved problems. They bought equipment for the military. They set up volunteer centers. One of the towns most affected was Sderot. They sent hundreds of volunteers to evacuate special needs people because the army had evacuated the people that could, jump in the armored cars, but the people that, were in wheelchairs and stuff didn't get out right away. So Achim Leneshek, sent special wheelchair vans and took them out one by one. They're just a remarkable organization. So that was the one I was I think you're referring to.
Yeah, you mentioned that the first one, and I was wondering when you were talking about it again, if it was the same one.
Let's see. So I mentioned them. I mentioned, oh, and then also mentioned the family forum, which is the network of families who have family members, loved ones who were held hostage by Hamas. And I met individually with members, and I also met with the coordinator for them, and I think it's very important to help them as well.
Thank you. And when we get this list, will we be able to also donate directly or have?
So, yes, we would like people to be able to pick where they want their money to go. We'd be happy to facilitate the funds. So we'll figure out how to do that so that you don't have to find which is the right website and how you know you're going to get a tax deduction letter. We'll take care of that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Sure. So I think we're coming to the end of our time. We'll do another one of these soon. I want to also make sure that everyone puts on their calendars right now, a week from Sunday, November 12th, we're going to have a community gathering different than the one that we had originally, because this one will really focus on building support from our friends and neighbors, from civic leaders, elected officials, and the messaging that we need to do to help get the hostages back.
You know what time that will be, Shep?
It'll be 3 p.m. At the Circus Arena that's around the corner from Michael's on East.
Circus Arts Conservatory.
Right, Circus Arts, yes.
So I see that there are questions in the chat. I think we will have a record of those, and I'll try to get back. But let me just read ones that aren't questions real quick. So Chaplain Tom Pfaff, the head of the Sarasota Ministerial Organization, wanted everyone to know that today the Sarasota Ministerial Association sent to the Herald Tribune, Tempo, and Observer a statement in support of Israel and our Jewish friends. So we're very grateful, Chaplain Tom. You've been supportive for years, but especially in this crisis, you've made it a priority. You've been strong and loud, and we couldn't be more grateful to you. Thank you. The question about the far left wing groups, including Jews in the far left wing groups, Jewish Voices for Peace. I think we'd have to have another Zoom about that, because all I can say is that there are some people whose political identities are so deeply embedded in their sense of self that they're really not interested in thinking about the facts from any perspective other than what reinforces what they already believe. So I'm not sure that our most effective strategy is to try to convince them. I think they're not in the mainstream, and I think we want to focus on the center and people that don't have a hardened view against Israel before this ever happened. So that's all I'll say about that. And I thought it would be nice if we could, because I do think there's great hope. I think there's great tragedy. I think there's great trauma. I think these are the most horrible days that the Jewish people have experienced since the Holocaust, since the Shoah, the worst cruelty and sadism and senseless murder of civilians, just for the sake of erasing them, but I also have seen enormous strength in Israel and Israeli people, and in the Jewish people. And honestly, everywhere I go, people have said to me, Am Yisrael Chai, which means the Jewish people will live and thrive. And I believe that that's true, because we're all really one family, and we will do anything we have to protect our family. So I have great hope. And I actually thought, because we need to have great hope in these difficult days and see a brighter future, that maybe we could end by singing Israel's national anthem, which translates to the hope. And we have a couple people in the Federation who agreed to lead us, if they're still willing to do that. And we will continue to be in touch. I want to thank all of you for caring so much, for speaking up, and for facing this tragic time with courage, and we will get through it together. Lisa Liat, could you lead us in the Hatikva?
Thank you, Shep, for representing us so well.
My honor.
Have a good flight.
Shep asked us to end with Hatikva, so Lisa is here with me, and feel free to join us if you want.
Thank you all for coming.
And see you on Sunday, November 12th at 3 o'clock at the Circus Arena.
Thank you.